Hi, and welcome to the Waterbrook Online. I'm the Reverend Dr. Pete ODERA. It's very interesting. Something happened to me during the Christmas holidays. We went to our home in Usenge. That's right by the lake. Beautiful place, wonderful. We spent a whole New Year's period with my mom. My mom was with all her children and all her grandchildren in the same place at the same time, which is rare. So then when we were done, we drove back, and I rarely drive. I rarely drive because it's such a long drive and it's very draining. The drive is about 8 hours. It's 8 hours if you're going direct with no traffic. That means you have to start at 3 or 4 in the morning and do that. But we didn't do this time. It was a Christmas break. So on our way back, we stopped on the way in Kisumu. And this may be a long way to introduce what it is that I'm saying, but we stopped in Kisumu to check the tire pressure. And as you know, Kisumu is 400 kilometers, something, three something, almost 400 kilometers from Nairobi. So it's anyway, whatever it is. The attendant was happily there and he was ready to check the air pressure on the tire. He seemed happy to help us. When I looked closely, I got out to stretch because it's been a long drive. I got out to stretch and he seemed to have finished. So I got back into the car and he seemed to have something in his hands. It turns out that he had taken the nozzle caps. The nozzle caps. Stay tuned as we go into today's episode of the Waterbrook Online. I'm talking about something. We've become a certain way. I'd like us to address this. As we go into today's topic. Don't be stupid. Like I said before in the introduction, I had traveled to visit with my mom to go to our home area in Usenge, which is an 8-hour drive. I really want to talk about what's happening to us as a people. And like I was talking about in the introduction, the petrol station attendant with the air pump had put all around, and I thought, what a nice guy, only to realize a little bit later that he had actually taken the nozzle caps. And so I watched him and he was ready to wave us goodbye. But he was stealing nozzle caps in order, this is pilfering nozzle caps in order to sell it back to us at a later time. I don't know, maybe that's what he was planning on doing. And this bothered me. On our drive, we continued with that drive. We stopped by in Molo. Now, of course, everybody knows that this is a highly productive part of the Rift Valley, very fertile, lots of crops, fruits and vegetables. So as any male driver knows, if you're driving from wherever to wherever, your wife is going to stop you and say to you, let's stop and get some vegetables and fruits. So these guys descended on the vehicle like an All Blacks versus Springboks scrum down. I mean, this camera. Okay, so and they're thrusting all these vegetables and fruits and what have you. So my wife is being kind. We want to support the economy of the place. So we take these fruits. We get home, found that a good number of the oranges, and this guy with the oranges was really insistent, a good number of the oranges that this one dude had thrust to us in the trunk, they were bad, I say this because something serious has happened to us as a people. We say that corruption and dishonesty and lack of integrity is high up in government, in parliament, in leadership. But there's something that has happened to us that if somebody can be dishonest with their produce, if somebody can be as dishonest as to steal nozzle caps, 50 shillings, 100 shilling worth of them, then something has happened to the fabric of us. And that's my topic today. And I know that the sermon title, the message title may be a little bit offensive, but stay with me still. Just bear with me as we go into this topic today. Don't be stupid. I want to read a passage of scripture which I think is important for us to look at. And the first one is from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse For we know it. 2 Corinthians 10 says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds." And then he goes on to say something. He says, "We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion." Notice he says, "lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ." Now, I think that's an important portion of scripture to read, but I want us to also read Exodus, the book of Exodus, chapter 18. And it's a little bit of a long read, but I think it's important. Let's read the scripture, and the scriptures are important for us to read. And we're going to look at verse 8 through to 22, and it says, let me read in the ESV. ESV, here it is. It says, chapter 1, verse 8. "Now there arose a new king, or new Pharaoh over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us." So this is an idea that came into the mind of the leader. The idea came into the mind of the leader. It was a thought. A thought came. "Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built, the Israelites, built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. In other words, there was more pressure and more growth. And the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel, so they were afraid. So there was a culture, a spirit of fear over the Egyptians. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar, in brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their works, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. Then the king of Egypt, that is Pharaoh, said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you serve as a midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live." So the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this? And let the male children live." The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and were very strong. Watch this. "And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, Every son that is born of the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live." So there is a planned genocide. I think this is important for us to know. Now, that particular portion of scripture seems to sort of springboard us into a very interesting story. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a young German pastor. And I think it's important for us to read widely. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a young German pastor and theologian who was ordained in Berlin in 1931. So he's ordained in Berlin 1931. Now, if you know your history, 1931 was the period of the Nazis rising, sort of parallel to the rising of the Nazi government. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was now ordained. He was one of the most prominent and vociferous opponents of Adolf Hitler's ideas and policies. So he was engaged. He was a young pastor who was engaged. He was in his mid-30s at this time, and his mind was engaged enough to understand that the policies and ideas of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were dangerous at the very least, but completely, I don't know if the word is completely nuclear, and I mean that in a metaphoric sense, and that those ideas were nuclear in order that in a way that it would completely destroy the fabric of what Germany was. So he was arrested and accused of plotting against the Nazi government. There was in fact, if you look it up, there's a story. It's called the July 20th. I think it's the July 20th plot. So there was a plot to kill the Führer, and so they arrested Dietrich Bonhoeffer along with many others, and they imprisoned them. So he was held in various concentration camps and executed. He was executed at the age of 39. They executed him at the age of 39. This was just about a week or two before the Allied forces liberated the concentration camp that he was held at, which was called Flossenburg. This was on the 9th of April in 1945. It is a terribly sad story. But we have the writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer to go. He wrote several books and ideas, and these are down. And this is actually where I'm coming from today. So I want you to park that idea, because there's one particular idea that Dietrich Bonhoeffer began to speak about, and it's the sermon title. He talked about stupidity. And stay with me, because I'm going to come back to that idea. So we've read the scriptures, we've listened to this little story about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I want to go into something. There's an idea that one of my mentors shared with us a while ago that I think I've talked about on occasion, and that's the idea of atmospheres and how culture develops. The spirit realm is constantly looking for legitimacy in the earth realm. The spirit realm, there are ideas in the spirit realm. So I'm not, please don't misunderstand me. The spirit realm, in a sense, is neutral. And I just need to say that because I know there's a lot of Christians who feel that there's a superiority of Christian thought. I want to say that in the spirit realm over a place, it usually is neutral, because there is no agency. Agency requires men. So the spirit realm is constantly looking for legitimacy in the earth realm. Now, if there is a spiritual idea, whether that idea is demonic or whether it's from a man, whatever it is, that idea is going to try and fight to find legitimacy in the earth. If God wants to bring something in the earth, he poses it as an idea, passes it on as an idea to somebody, a man, agency. It needs agency in the earth realm. So spiritual things can only be given legitimacy by human agency. They can only be given, this is very important for us to understand, because many of us think that the devil is stronger than he actually is, because man has been given custodianship of the earth realm. That is our assignment. We were assigned as custodians of the earth realm. So man is to be to the earth what God is to the universe. So that spiritual idea, that spiritual voice is therefore super powerful. Whether the spiritual voice is the voice of God, the voice of demonic agencies, or the voice of men, all of those ideas are fighting for legitimacy in the earth realm. That's point number one. It's something that we need to begin to understand. If we begin to think like that, then we begin to look at radio, at television, at the internet very differently. We look at it as an aperture through which ideas now come from the spirit realm into the natural. I'm not talking about spooky ghost things floating about in your room. The way those things come is through ideas of men. So that's number one. Now, let me show you a progression. A spiritual idea, once spiritual idea comes out, once a man, an agency, once a person grabs hold of this spiritual idea and incubates on it and meditates on it and lives and goes through it, something begins to happen. Once that thing comes, they do something with that idea. And when that idea is sustained, it creates an atmosphere. I know you've heard this said, there's an atmosphere of fear in the place. That means that because of something that happened or something that somebody says, there's an atmosphere of fear. It's an atmosphere of fear. This is actually what the power of terrorism is. It's an idea. Please note that there are no terrorists on every doorstep, in every house, in every building all over the world. All you need is one or two who do something completely crazy and go and fly their planes right into the most prominent buildings in New York City. And the entire world is then held hostage to this idea that terrorism is real, and it became a reality. And then that idea gave birth to smaller groups, and even so, that idea of terrorism spread. It was became atmosphere of terrorism. An atmosphere sustained creates a climate. This becomes the climate. People talk about the business climate in a space. The climate, there was a climate, again they talk about climate of fear. That climate sustained, that atmosphere sustained creates a climate. A climate that is sustained creates a stronghold. The way people begin to think, the way people begin to think, the way they begin to think. So this climate, if it's sustained, so Al Qaeda get up and what's his name? I'll show you how this works. Osama bin Laden gets this idea: bomb the imperialist infidel. You're crazy. We hate you, and we're gonna bomb you because you're oppressing the ideas that we propagate. And so they decide we're going to do a couple of things. One of the things they decided to do is to bomb the U.S. embassy in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. And then a few years later, they decide that they're going to fly planes right into Twin Towers. And that idea now creates an atmosphere. People begin to understand that there's a possibility. And then people begin to see, the people who are sympathetic, that atmosphere becomes a climate. That climate now, people begin to say, there's a stronghold. And so the way people start to think is that the best way to get your ideas propagated is through violent injection of these violent ideas or activities throughout the world. And the next thing you know, you don't just have one Al Qaeda operative, you have Al Shabaab, and then you have Boko Haram, and then you have eventually that metastasized to something like ISIS, where now there was an entire population of people who are thinking like this, that this is the way, that jihad is the way to bring about change and transformation. That's a climate that was sustained, and it became a stronghold. Now watch this: a stronghold sustained. A stronghold sustained. A stronghold is not an invisible demonic wall that's in the air. It's the way people think. It's the way people think. Now that stronghold sustained becomes a culture, becomes the way people do things. There's a culture, the way people do things, the way Kenyans, the reason why we are the way we are in Kenya, the reason why Africans are the way they are, the reason why Europeans are the way they are, is because it is now culture to do and think a certain way. Now, let me give you a couple of historical examples of these spiritual ideas. And I hope you're being blessed by this, because revelation comes through these things, and I hope you begin to understand. Let me show you what's happening. So, Henry Ford, let's give a couple of historical examples. So, Henry Ford is this engineer and industrialist in the late 19th century, coming into the 20th century. He's an American entrepreneur, and he used to work. He actually used to work for Thomas Edison. He worked for Thomas Edison, left that organization, started another one, and that evolved into what they call the Cadillac Corporation, the ones who make the Cadillac. Then he started this idea that, you know what, I want, and this was his idea. He wanted a car that would be affordable, easy to operate, and available to the American population. Their best-selling car, he started the Ford Motor Company when he founded it. The best-selling car was the Model T, which was introduced in 1908. Now, let me tell you something about this thing. This was an idea. Please understand that tarmac roads did not exist at the time. Tarmac roads did not exist. Certainly not in the broad sense that they are there today. Maybe there was a couple of tarmac roads, but most of the roads were dirt roads. So the roads in the way that we know them today did not exist when he was bringing the car, this Model T, into the mass market. He was saying this is going to be a mass market product. Let me tell you something else. Petrol stations, as we know them today, didn't really exist. They didn't really exist as we know them today. What would happen back then, if you needed petrol, you'd go to a pharmacy, and the pharmacist would sell some fuel to people who were motoring enthusiasts because there weren't a lot of cars. Most people would travel by horse-drawn carriages or by train. Please understand that that was the norm at the time. So to say that we're going to have a car, people thought it was crazy. People thought it was crazy. There were a handful of filling stations, places where in fact, they were called filling stations. You go to this place and they fill, the pharmacist fills your car. He fills your car, keeps it there. This was how it was, and that the idea of the affordable automobile found legitimacy even before the infrastructure for it was built, because it was an idea that found expression through a man who had legitimacy in the earth realm and had access to industry, and it completely transformed the world. Completely. We have not recovered yet. Let me give you a closer to home example, an African example. Mohammed Ibrahim, better known as Mo Ibrahim, born in Nubia in Sudan, he founded Celtel in 1998. He worked for British Telecom and then British Telecom for several years. And then Mo Ibrahim, he couldn't even find funding. He couldn't find funding for his organization. He had this idea. So he started his company. He was looking for funding from banks. The banks thought, look, you have an idea, but nobody's going to buy this thing. Africans are poor. They don't have money to buy this thing. What do you mean you're going to have one network throughout all countries, one network? We can't even call Kenya for crying out loud. What's wrong with you? And he kept going from bank to bank to bank to look for money because he was building a network that did not exist on an equally non-existent infrastructure for things that were just thoughts. The thinking was that mobile telephones are for wealthy Westerners. Oh, my goodness. By the time Mo Ibrahim sold Celtel to Zain, which got eventually bought by Airtel, which was acquired by Bharti Group, by the time he was selling Celtel, they had 24 million subscribers in 14 different countries in Africa. 24 million, this entire nation, two nations. He sold this previously non-existent idea on a non-existent infrastructure for $3.4 billion. An idea that was worth $3.4 billion when it eventually grew. What I'm trying to say is that it's an idea that is seized upon, that is incubated, becomes an atmosphere. That atmosphere becomes a climate. The climate becomes a stronghold. Stronghold becomes a culture. We now have a culture. You can't have conversation. People go to concerts and don't even watch the concerts anymore because they're on their phones. Constantly, people, the first thing they do in the morning is go to their phone, go to their cell phone, and the last thing they do at night, in fact, sometimes even in their sleep, their phone is still working. Today, we take these networks for granted wherever we go because the spiritual idea found expression in the earth realm. It was seized upon, and it has now become a culture. It's an entire culture without which some of the ideas that even we now are expressing to you would never have reached you. Isn't that amazing? That's how these things work. An idea. Let's look at some biblical examples before I now tie this thing together. We've just read from Exodus chapter 1 that an idea, spiritual idea, was birthed and incubated in Pharaoh. These Israelites will destabilize our franchise. Let's destroy their capacity for their future outcome. Let's destroy that capacity. This was the idea, the spiritual idea that jumped into Pharaoh's head. It grows into a genocidal program. It comes that eliminates all male children, explained in Exodus chapter 1, if you look at it again. Moses survives this program somehow because of a divine idea and an intervention in order to preserve that entire generation. That intervention caused Moses to survive. I want to say that it was an idea. It was an idea, that it was a spiritual idea, not from the Lord. It was a spiritual idea. When the enemy saw that there was a Moses coming in the future, he planted an idea in the minds of a king and said, we must eliminate every possibility. Real quick, we go fast forward to the New Testament, and the story is told in the book of Matthew. During the time of the birth of Jesus, a spiritual idea, very similar, was birthed and incubated by Herod. A new king of the Jews was born. So these magi from the east came and said, we've seen his star. Something has happened. There's a king that has been born. And the king looked and said, we gotta do something. That's a threat to our franchise. We must destroy the capacity for that future outcome. Same idea that was birthed. And it's a strategy that the enemy uses, birth an idea. An edict then goes out to eliminate every male under 2 years of age. Every program, let me say this, every program that involves that level of mass killing has its genesis in a demonic idea that is incubated and then carried out by an agent in the earth realm. I want to say every idea, when you see genocide at that mass level, it was demonic. Whether it's the Holocaust, whether it's Rwanda, wherever you see that level, it means that there was a demonic idea that was incubated by a leader, and then he carried this thing out to carry it. Now I need to say to you that every idea, every time that you see something like this, that means that somewhere behind it there's an idea that's coming. There's an idea, a prophetic idea that there's a Mosaic idea that God is trying to bring into the earth realm, and it is the precursor of that is the enemy's idea. He sees it and says we must destroy that idea. Satan cannot do anything. He can do nothing without agency or cooperation of a custodian in the earth realm. Are you with me? He can do nothing. So this is where I want us to begin to understand this. Now, back to Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Now, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his writing, it eventually became a book. It's called Letters from Prison. He wrote something. He says he defined stupidity as not an intellectual defect, but a moral one. Now you can actually there's several on YouTube, several little lessons that people have put together of what Dietrich Bonhoeffer taught. In fact, there's a book, you can find it, it's Letters from Prison. He defines stupidity not as an intellectual defect, but a moral one. And I need us to begin to understand the difference. So when I say don't be stupid, I'm not asking you to cease being intellectually defective. No, what I'm saying is that sometimes even intellectual people, clever people, can be stupid because they lack moral probity. Not the lack of intellectual capacity, but the capture of the moral rectitude of a section of society. This is the thing. And in fact, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that the stupid person is more dangerous than the morally the stupid person is more dangerous than an evil person. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. He says the person who is malicious, that's what he was talking about. A malicious person is not as dangerous as a stupid person, because a stupid person has to be handled with care. Please remember, he's not talking about intellectual stupidity. He's talking about moral bankruptcy. Bonhoeffer argued that when a leader or a section of society loses its moral capacity to stupidity and mass psychosis, it is the duty of those who are enlightened to call out and correct the societal defects. It is our duty as those who are enlightened and can see this moral defect. It is our duty. In fact, we are commanded that we must call out. It's our prophetic duty that we must call out those in society who are stupid. It's important. Wow. I argue that the church is poised at a critical point in history. At a critical point in history. We in Africa can choose to tolerate the status quo. We can choose. We're going to tolerate the status quo and allow history to judge us, or stand up and demand better from our leaders. Our leaders are at a place of stupidity in the context of what Dietrich Bonhoeffer was talking about. moral corruption at a level where it's now dangerous, not just for the people who is immediately involved with, but for generations to come. When known leaders behave inappropriately, are openly and unrepentantly immoral, or they engage in illegal activity, do we just stand by and say, touch not God's anointed? Is that what we say? Surely our children and our grandchildren will ask us, why didn't you do something? You saw this, why didn't you? Now, the reason I say this is because I did the same thing. I began to ask my dad. And my late father was the speechwriter for our first vice president. And because of his access to the first vice president, I later on asked him, I said, listen, why didn't you people say anything? And this is what he said to me, Pete, we went to jail. My father was imprisoned because of his ideas. My father was in prison because he was a speechwriter for somebody whose ideas challenged the status quo. Are you with me? It is possible for us to have leaders who are stupid. It is possible for us to have pastors who are stupid, not intellectually incapable. No, that's not what we're talking about. Morally corrupt. People who can't judge and have refused to have lost the capacity to be sensitive to the voice of God. Stop being. The church, because of stupidity, is at risk of impoverishing the next generation. Not just spiritually, but also economically. I say this because instead of investing and calling out the African governments, the Kenyan government, whatever it is, the African governments in their lack of providing providing very basic things. Please remember that at the turn of independence, when people were in the nations, and regardless of whichever nation you look at, Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, Nigeria, the promise was the same. We promised to give education, food, security to all our citizens. 50 plus years later, these are still the same promises that our politicians are making. They're still dealing with mass lack of clean water, lack of education, lack of basics, things that Europeans take completely for granted. Now, I don't even get into the historical reason for all of these things before independence. I'm just talking about now. Instead of, and the church who is aware can see these things, instead of the church investing in development and education in the church, the present idea that is prevalent in most of Africa is materialism and greed rather than investment and development. Is this too deep for us? Aye, Dr. Pete, it's just January. We're seeing tricksters and feel-good hype pushers, the guys who are just hype and pushing, deceiving people at the bottom of the pyramid to part with the little money that they can scrounge. I came with both guns blazing. Meanwhile, it's all a lie. Every index. I was talking with Josiah earlier today. Every index shows that Africa is poor and that we contribute to less than 10% of the world's GDP. Less than 10% of the world's GDP. In fact, let me talk about Kenya. Kenyan statistics are showing that the last time we checked, the last report that I read, it's not a new report, it's from 2017, I believe it was. The Kenya Bureau of Statistics said that less than 7% of Kenya's working population earn over 100,000 shillings. That is $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month. That's less. So that means, in fact, they calculated that all the so-called dollar millionaires in Kenya can fit in one room. In fact, let me go further. Now, I checked yesterday. None of the so-called rich people in Kenya, not a single one, are actually wealthy, because you don't see their names in the Forbes 500. nor the Forbes, whatever number it is, there's not a single Kenyan in the top 2,500. In fact, we know that there are 2,600 plus billionaires in the world. Not one of them is a Kenyan, but there is a Tanzanian on that list. There is a Tanzanian. For as much as we laugh at that, Kenyans, we like to laugh at Tanzanians, saying how Tanzanians are so backward. Hey, bro, there's a Tanzanian who's on the Forbes 500 list, not one single Kenyan. Every single one of you Kenyans who say that you're wealthy, not one of you is on the Forbes 500. So don't pretend to say that you got a lot of money. Y'all don't have no money. Yet we have an entire generation. So you're faking it. You're faking it. You're lying to us. You're faking it. You have an entire generation that has been fooled into thinking that I'm going to get rich or die trying. They're chasing that mirage that we have formed for them, that has been perpetuated by a stupid church who will not teach her people economic principles. That's where we are. And this is what I mean by being, so if I were in a church, say, nudge your neighbor and tell them, don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. Let me give you a good example. Good example. Let me talk about a good example. 2 years ago, the Lord gave me a word. 2 years ago, I taught right here 2 years ago. In fact, you can look for the message. It's called Sitting in the Window of Opportunity. 2 years ago. It was the first week of September 2021. I talked about the 5 areas of growth for the next few years. I talked about biotech. I talked about agriculture. I talked about cybersecurity. I talked about analytics. I talked also about artificial intelligence, AI. 2 years ago. That's 2021. It's 2023 now. And I talked about that. And you know what? Somebody reminded me a week ago, and they sent me a video about ChatGPT. And they said to me, Dr. Pete, this is what you had been talking about. Of course, it's what I've been talking about. One of the areas of growth was artificial intelligence. This past month or so, beginning of December, end of November, ChatGPT, when they launched that new AI site, ChatGPT got over 1 million subscribers in less than a week. Less than 1 week of its launching. They had 1 million subscribers. I know that's crazy because I launched another platform recently and we did not have 1 million subscribers in less than a week. But how many of us are investing in teaching our children coding? If this is the future, this is the area of growth, how many of us are learning code or this is the thing I started challenging myself with, maybe I need to learn how to write code. How many of us are teaching our children how to code? Our priorities as a church for winning souls, which is our assignment in the earth, winning souls. And our priorities, that priority is low priority. Many churches, in fact, most of the churches that I've gone to, it is not their priority to win souls. They're not winning souls. It's not a priority. We're not. And secondly, our priorities for investing in the next generation are mixed up. So what are we doing? My next message, the next episode after this, I'll be talking about this. And I'll be talking about the church and the gates, the church and the gates. So there's a call to action. What's the call to action? Let's call to action. Let me not complain so much. What should we do? What should we do? Since we're inept, inadequate, and all these things, what should we do? Number one, check yourself. Check yourself. Are you in the faith? Paul asked the church in Corinth, I think it's 2 Corinthians 13:5. He says, examine yourself to see whether you're in the faith. Test yourselves. Or do you not realize this about yourself, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test? 2 Corinthians 13:5. Are you in the faith? Are you really a believer? The Berean church in Acts chapter 17 checked to see if the apostles' doctrine was true. The apostles came to them and taught something. They said, no, we got to check you out. We're going to see if this thing is true in Acts chapter 17. The Ephesian church in Revelation chapter 2, they were astute enough to discern who were fake apostles. We accept all sorts of people, and especially in Kenya, we accept all sorts of people because, we are hospitable people. He is a man of God, whatever. I've done it before. Hey, bro, you can fool me once, but you won't fool me again. You won't fool me again. The whole idea of this parasitic shenanigans, parasitic charlatans carrying out these shenanigans, as far as I'm concerned, it is time for the church to wake up. Are you part of the problem? Man of God, I want to talk to you. Are you part of the problem? Are you training your people to check themselves? Or do they still depend on you, man of God, for, give us the word for the day, give us the what have you, give us, people are asking their pastors, give us this daily bread. Jesus said this is what we should be praying to the Father. You don't get daily bread from the Father, you get it from your pastor. Woe unto that pastor, because what if the pastor fails? Have you given in to stupidity? Check yourself. That's number one. Check yourself. Number two, arm yourselves with truth. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 13 to 14 reads this. It says, therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And there is an evil day coming. In fact, dare I say, the evil day is now. The evil day is now. And having done all, to stand firm, stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth. King James says it, gird your loins with the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness. Arm yourself with truth. Are you taking in truth? Are you taking in truth? In this day and age of relativism, are you founded on the truth? I was doing a research recently. Every single day, there's at least 3.7 million new uploads onto YouTube alone. I'm going to say that again. Every day, there's 3.7 million. So there's 3.7 million ideas that are coming onto YouTube every day, onto the platform that you're probably watching. And I have not counted all the other platforms that are there. And then there's radio, then there's television, there's all these things. Are you taking in truth? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Is your prophet or apostle, whatever, offering another way other than the way that Jesus offered? Can your philosophy or faith stand up to the test of truth? Epistemology, can it stand up to truth? The balance of epistemology. Maybe this is too high for us. Maybe you're just busy. You just, hey, Dr. Pete, all I need is just bread. I need to just figure out how I'm going to get some money before the day is done. Bro, I'm saying to this, arm yourself with truth. Truth, when it comes to revelation, will put bread on your table. It'll put bread on your table. I'm telling you the truth. The third thing and the last thing that I'm going to say is, leave the red flag places. It is time in 2023. Are we still going to tolerate this nonsense and keep going to this sarakasi, this circus places? No. Acts 20:29 says this, for I know this, that after my departing shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. He's talking about wolves in sheep's clothing, and they have only one agenda and one agenda alone, to devour the sheep. To devour the sheep. Let's not tolerate the nonsense anymore. Our brothers and sisters are being fleeced. People are going to these places in their thousands because of lack of rooting, looking for this kind of entertainment or something. In fact, most people go to this place not because they want entertainment, but because they want a way out of their poverty. We need to teach our people how to walk in the principles of the kingdom so that they can be lifted out of the place of poverty. Are you with me? But I'm going to say this. Once you see the red flag, bro, leave before you become broke or dead or both. Because what I've seen, my experience in the years that we've now seen these things coming up, is that we're setting ourselves up. Kenya, we're setting ourselves up. Africa, you're setting yourself up for a tragedy. Are you waiting? Listen, we hear every day of people who are either drinking petrol, eating grass, doing all sorts of crazy shenanigans in the name of following taking a spiritual journey. Yeah, it's cultic. That's really what it is, and it's completely unbiblical. Are we waiting for a tragedy before we call out these charlatans? Because our governments are now complicit, where you find somebody is cheating an entire system, and an entire government is now protecting a person like that because, I don't know, this guy supplies votes or whatever it is to those governments. We are on the precipice of losing not just individuals, but an entire generation. There's a generation that's coming, Gen Z. I want to talk to you about that at another occasion when God gives me the opportunity. There's an entire generation coming behind that we are about to lose. We're about to lose because of the lack of faith in an institution because of these charlatans. We allowed these demonic ideas to incubate, and it has now become the norm. We tolerated them on our drive time radio shows, and now look at where we are morally. We must be the ones to refuse this stupidity. We must say, no, 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 no. This kind of stuff we will not tolerate. Are we really building our people? Are we really building our people? Are we really building the congregations that we lead? Are we really building our families? Are we really giving our audiences what it is that they need to be better people, to become decisive for kingdom and dominion in the future? This is the question that we need to ask ourselves. Bro, sis, don't be stupid. I want to leave it right there. I want us to really reflect on this, that we'll begin to build a future that is brilliant for the generation to come. The Lord bless you. Thank you for staying with us all the way until the end for this very serious message that I believe should guard our principles as we go into 2023. Don't be stupid. If this thing has been a blessing to you, I'm going to ask you to share it with somebody. Share it with somebody. I'm also going to ask you to do something else, is to like and to subscribe. I say this because we are constantly putting out this information. In fact, I've made a decision, I've made an aim to put it on every platform. So we're going to have this as podcasts, what have you, on the various platforms. But I'm going to say to you, share it. Share it with people who can find blessing from it. I know that that's the case. Now, if you subscribe and if you click, if you like it, whatever, what then ends up happening is that the algorithm begins to work in your favor and bring similar messages to you and to others who are like you. And so that's what, we figured how to crack the code. But here's what I'm saying. Share it with somebody just so that it's a blessing. I'm going to say also, continue to support us in the way that you do. It costs money to be here. So I'm going to say to you, unashamedly, support us so that we can continue to bring you this high quality message that I believe is life changing. And there's a couple of ways to do it. The first way is, we have a mobile money platform, but we also have our bank. So you can send it through either. So send your financial gifts through any one of these two platforms, and it's showing up on your screen. Our mobile money platform is M-Pesa 345086, and it's a pay bill. When you go into the pay bill, you can ask when the message comes and asks for account number, put in your name or your reason for giving. Or you can put a standing order in your bank account to send a one-time gift, or you can put a monthly gift that comes every month to us, and that can be paid through our account, Waterbrook Ministry. That's the name of the account. Our account is held at Stanbic Bank Kenya, and the account number is 286-286-7596. That's 010,286-7596. I'm going to say that again. Our account is held at Stanbic Bank, and it's the Waterbrook Ministry, and our account number is 010,286-7596. It's scrolling on your screen. If I got it wrong, don't worry. The one on the screen is accurate. And God will bless you. Thank you for supporting us, and we're still here on the Waterbrook Online. My name is the Reverend Dr. Pete ODERA, and the Lord bless you.